Hello, I'm Karen Quattromoni, the Director of Public Relations for Object Management Group, OMG. Welcome to our OMG podcast series. At OMG, we're known for driving industry standards and building tech communities. Today, we're focusing on the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance area, which is an OMG program. The area accelerates AR adoption by creating a comprehensive ecosystem for enterprises, providers, and research institutions. This Q&A session will be led by Christine Perey from Perey Research and Consulting.
Welcome. I'm very happy to host this fireside chat with the CEO of AR Genie. Tarun, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Christine. Thanks for inviting me for this talk. And hi, everyone. This is Tarun Mehta, and I'm CEO of AR Genie. And what we are doing at AR Genie is combining AR and AI to really improve the productivity of the industrial or the enterprise worker. And specifically, we are interested in how we can use AR glasses, something that's always on. Someone is wearing it, and they can use an AI system in conjunction with AR to help them improve their daily work for the industrial or the factory worker.
So really focusing on those industrial use cases, the workplace. And I want to also say we're using the term generative AI or Gen AI to mean that the information had not previously been connected in an experience by some programmatic means, but in fact, it's being connected somewhat automatically using the AI algorithm. So tell me a little bit more about that. How does it start for you or for a customer?
Sure. I think one thing that we have to realize is that every company there's just so much data out there, and it's just really hard to get access. I mean, get the right information from that data. So, for example, if you have a factory out there, there's thousands of IoT sensors. There's so many machines. Every machine has a manual. If something goes wrong, what do you do? When was this machine maintained? So there's just so much data out there. And just imagine if there is a worker or a manager on the field, and if he needs information to this data, and if they have always on access to this information using AR glasses, I think that's what we are targeting. And really, I think the crux of the problem is this huge amount of data that people are having, and machines are getting smarter, as well as systems are getting more complex.
And programmatically attaching every piece of information is very time-consuming and expensive. Plus, there's new information being generated all the time, right? I mean, that's the beauty of connected things, is that they're always connected.
Yeah, exactly. And Christine, like you mentioned in your blog post, I don't know if people have seen that blog post. If you can mention it here in this interview, you really nailed the point on how AR and AI is combining together, especially generating this information using generative AI for things that people really haven't planned for, or things that you haven't programmed for. For example, you have a machine with a new part coming in, and you want to ask how to replace or fix that machine part. How do you do that? Or if something goes wrong, and the system is able to generate response on how to fix that part in the machine.
So where are we in the journey? The concept is clear, but where are we in terms of, has this been done before? Can you provide some examples, either that were done, years ago, or just a few months ago? Or so where are we in this journey? Can you explain what you see?
So sure. So let me just explain to you. We as a company, AR Genie, we are still pretty new to this. We released our first prototype at CES in January. So that's just last month. And I'll tell you one of the challenges that we are facing and that we are trying to overcome is, and generative AI is just great, but how do you know it is accurate? I mean, if you are in an industrial environment, you have to be sure that your information, the output
is not hallucinations.
Exactly. And that's one of the challenges that companies will face. And that's what we are trying to address, and especially if you're combining AR and AI together. So, for example, if you get an output and you get actually instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to fix a machine part, and not just textual information. So it actually points to the part of the machine with an AR kind of annotation. Hey, this is the part you need to replace. and that's the tricky part, and that's what we are trying to solve. And trust me, I believe a lot of companies are working on something similar, and let us see who comes out with a good, clever solution for this.
Right.
We
So you have
we
to
do
train the system. You have to give it some data. Do
correct.
you use like an off the shelf LLM? Is that what you're doing? I mean, it's not using
E-
words, right? Because it's looking at images, or is it looking at
Correct.
text? What is it looking at?
Yeah, so we are specifically using multimodal LLMs. So multimodal means a LLM, large language model, that's trained on images, voice, video, and the idea is that, especially in our world with AR, you have AR glasses and you are looking at the world, and you have this rich information in terms of images that you can use and feed it to the LLM. And the output you get from the LLM, you want images as well as some AR instructions that you can feed to the end user. I think the landscape is much more different than a normal generative AI query where you get a textual output. And here we are specifically looking at multimodal LLMs, which work with images and text and other kind of data. Um,
So do you need to train it using a company's own data? Is that how you're going to go
Correct.
about it, or is that how you're
Exactly.
doing it now? You have to get
Ex-
permission and you have to get access to all of the data repository and all this learning information and modules and training and train on
Yep.
that. Okay.
Correct. And that's part of the challenge as well, because a lot of these companies have their own different systems in the back end, and then that's part of the challenge. How do you get access to this data? And so it is much more complex than what people think, and so we are hoping
Sounds
to come up with a
easy,
good solution
hard to
for it.
do.
Exactly.
How about, well, how big a data set do we need? I mean, what?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on the company. For example, if you have if you have a machine, for example, one machine, then you might have 10 manuals for it. Then the data set is small. But if you have a big factory, for example, and you have thousands of sensors with IoT data coming up, and thousands, hundreds of machines with different manuals, and then if you have a backend system with a lot of data, so that can get big really fast. I
So
don't have the
can
specific
you
answer
tell
to it at
us
the moment, but
some
yeah,
ideas of like, I understand what you're saying. You're saying it depends
yeah,
on the use case and it depends
exactly,
on
yeah,
your target, what your goals
yeah,
are.
yeah,
Okay, so millions, potentially
yeah.
millions of lines of code. Do you have any idea how long it takes to train a multimodal model, or how much
Yes.
it costs? What are some figures you can give us?
Yeah, so I can't give you the exact cost right now, but it can take anywhere from from probably half an hour to few days, and depends on the company and the amount of information they have. Um, Typically, what we suggest companies to do is first experiment, see what works, and they can use some simpler techniques than just training the LLMs. For example, use RAG, to get an idea of how the system will perform, and experiment with which LLMs work better for them. And
Mhm.
and also there's a question of cost. So some of the open source models can become much cheaper than using ChatGPT, where it can get really expensive if your prompts are too big, for example, or if your tokens are too much. So
So, let's walk through a use case. Well, actually, I'd like to walk through two, just
sure,
one and more controlled. You've already spoken about the manufacturing setting and a machine. We'll walk through
yeah,
that one in a second. But there's another one that you shared with me about maybe an accident has happened, either to a building or to a
yeah,
person or an automobile or a piece of equipment, and an insurance company needs to come in and compare the old with the new. And
correct, yeah.
so let's walk through that just a little bit. When you go to a customer site, they say train on this, then what happens?
Okay, so for example, for training purposes, so if you go to the customer site and train on this, so for example, an example is, um, let's say you go to a printer and you want to, let's a big industrial printer, and you want to say, how do I change the printer toners? So you can just ask generative AI system, how do I change the printer toner? And then it will create the instructions for you and give you step-by-step instruction. Step one, take out this part and then replace this part with something else. That's one example of a system like this for training.
So first
And
it
the
went
other use
from
case,
speech
yeah,
to text. It went from speech to text, and then that
correct,
text
correct,
was entered into the model, and that
exactly,
like a prompt, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
the model replies with a series of images and instructions. Okay,
Correct.
good.
One more thing, Christine, I want to add is because you have the AR glasses on, so AR glasses have an image of what you're looking at, so it can actually understand what kind of printer you have and generate the response that's specific to that printer or specific to that equipment you're looking at. We are also working on technologies, so you can actually select a particular part. So you can say, hey, can you tell me the part number or when this part was replaced? So it can look in the database and find that information for you.
Interesting. Now let's do a little less controlled one. So
Sure.
something either indoors or outdoors or anywhere, something less controlled than a factory.
Sure. Um,
You
so in
mentioned
terms
about
of
the
insurance,
insurance
yes,
where, yeah.
yeah. So this is one of the requests from one of the biggest clients, insurance companies in Japan that contacted us, and what they are interested in is in something. Let's say you have a car accident, and then the issues they face is then they send an adjuster on the field to assess the damage, and sometimes these adjusters may not be perfect, or they might have vested interest in giving more damages than is required to pay. And they want to have some sort of insurance system that can verify what the adjuster has said.
Not to
And for example,
replace the adjuster, but to validate what the
yeah,
adjuster
yeah,
says. Yeah.
exactly. So, for example, if there's a damage on the car, you can capture it in the images, make a 3D model of it, and compare to a 3D model of a good car, and say, hey, these are the damages, and this is how much it will cost, and if there's discrepancies, then it can be flagged, for example. So,
Excellent, excellent. Good example of Gen AI plus AR or plus any image. It could be a photograph. It could be a
yeah,
3D model. Yeah. Okay.
correct. Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that I suggested is that perhaps AI would be used to erase information.
Yes.
So I think, as of course, the video has to be segmented. Whatever the AR glasses or device is
Yeah.
capturing, it has to segment the world. And it's quite easy to
Correct.
segment a face or some certain kind of
Yeah.
machine. You could
Yeah.
imagine that you want to identify the machine to provide instructions,
Yeah.
but you also may want to
Yeah.
identify the machine to hide it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's out
Yeah.
in it's behind a cabinet in the
Yeah.
public, and you don't want everybody to
Yeah.
know what's inside the cabinet.
Yeah.
So what about this idea of the AI automatically erasing or obfuscating? What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Is that a
Yeah.
possibility?
I think, Christine, I think you raised a really good important point that we never thought about before, and I tell you the reason why. We have been talking to some companies that are working in the field of defense. So, for example, if you are out in the field, and if you're getting support from someone else, and you really don't want to show where you are in the field, for your security, and there's wars going on. We all know, around the world, different places around the world. And the US is providing a lot of equipment in these wars, and they need support, and for security reasons they want to even hide the person who is operating over there in the remote area. And I think this kind of technology will become important. We personally haven't seen the requirement for it, but I believe we will start seeing. If not, we have been seeing these requirements already. So I think that's a very good point to raise on privacy issues in AI videos, in
Right.
videos
I
that
mean,
can be used.
right. It could
Yeah,
be privacy to the other users, or it could be protecting the person's locations or some intellectual
exactly.
property. It could be
Yeah,
anything could be
yeah,
blurred.
yeah,
So I think
exactly.
this is an example. Instead of adding AI to what the AR user sees,
Yeah,
adding AI to what the AR camera captures. So it's kind of in the opposite
correct.
direction.
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
there are there other, let's just say, out of the box kinds of uses that I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but in the
Well,
last
no,
minutes, are there some things that you want to share that you've never seen done, but you're thinking about?
yeah, I think there is probably a requirement, or people have problems, right? If something goes wrong, they want things to be fixed, and if there's a system that can help, and I just can't be very specific right now because we are talking to certain companies
Mhm.
on really how to improve the manual, on manuals, and I just can't talk too much details because
Right.
the
Here's
projects
a
are still in pipeline. But
What about
yeah,
compliance? In many industries, you must provide evidence
yeah,
that something was done. This doesn't
yeah,
really, in my mind, qualify as generative AI.
yeah.
But is that a use case that you see sometimes?
So what we have talked to some companies is in factories, for example, for safety. That's one thing that we have seen, and I think that probably is relevant to compliance as well. Let's say a machine is too hot, and if your AR glass has a IR sensor,
Mhm.
then you can just issue a warning, hey, don't touch it. So that's for safety, so you don't get burned, for example. So again, that's safety. I'm pretty sure there are requirements for safety compliance in industries, and AR glasses or the AR technology can definitely help
Mhm. Good
with
example.
it. And
Good
also there's,
example.
yeah, also remember AR glasses is also recording, so you can actually see if your workers are following your safety procedures or not, and take corrective actions, and
Right.
maybe automatically detect it with AI. So
Exactly. The connection that I have with
yeah,
AI is that if you're recording hours and hours of
yeah,
activity from any user,
yeah,
no one's going to manually want to go through and have the
yeah,
time. It's much too expensive to go through it
yeah,
individually. So
exactly.
having a model that can evaluate every frame or every segment for alignment with the protocol would be a way
Yeah,
of using AI in conjunction with the recording after the fact.
yeah, yeah. An example for this is what we have talked to a few companies is in construction. For example, you are putting an antenna on top of a roof, and there are certain protocols you need to follow, and we have heard cases that people actually die if they don't follow the protocols. And if people are making mistakes and you can detect with AI, then you can actually warn them, hey, you need to be careful, this is dangerous stuff. And I think definitely AI and AR can be really helpful in that regard. AR with capturing the data, and AI with analyzing it with these hours and hours of data.
In real time, and
Exactly,
telling them, yeah, I think this comes to me that the main value of AR is about risk reduction. It's risk to things,
exactly,
risk to people,
exactly.
risk to risk.
Yeah, yep,
It's a huge
exactly.
field. Well, I'm
Yep,
glad we agree on that. So thank you
yeah,
very much, Tarun. It was wonderful to meet you and discuss this topic,
yeah.
and I look forward to hearing much more about your progress and work in this area. Thank you for your
Yeah, and thank you,
time.
Christine. Yeah, and thanks for inviting me as well.